Hey, what's going on, guys? So in today's video, we're going to change the oil on my 5th gen 4Runner that I just got here, 2024 TRD Off-Road Premium. I wanted to chat about, a couple common misconceptions when it comes to changing your oil, as well as just show you how to do it, a general how-to video as well. So real quick before we get into it, a couple of the common misconceptions that I want to address and just things to know about changing your oil on a 4Runner. One big question that I hear a lot and I see a lot in forums is how often should you change your oil? So let's start there. So in general, manufacturers lately have shifted to a 10,000 mile service interval. And generally why they do that is to appease the EPA. So it's not necessarily because your vehicle has changed over the years. Many years ago, they recommended 5,000 mile intervals for the 4Runner, and now we're looking at 10,000 mile intervals. So nothing has changed with the vehicle itself or the engine itself. What's changing is they are able to squeeze a little bit more life out of fully synthetic oil and then also satisfy the EPA and reduce their overall emissions standards. So in general, to answer the question, you should change your oil at least every 5,000 miles if you're under normal driving conditions. If you do extreme off-roading, you should probably do closer to 3,000 miles oil change intervals. And when it comes to your first oil change interval, there's a lot of debate here. Now, some people will say that the manufacturers put, lubricant in the oil initially to kind of help your break-in, so you shouldn't change it. There's not a lot of evidence to show that you really shouldn't change the oil, but there is no harm in changing your oil at about, I would say there's no harm in changing your oil at about 1,000 miles on your first interval. What I'm most concerned about is having some sort of, any sort of metallic metals actually in the oil during that break-in period. So after that first 1,000 miles, I think it's a good idea to change it if you plan to keep your 4Runner quite a long time, like most of us do. So first oil change, I would recommend 1,000 miles, and then 5,000 miles at least thereafter once you do your first oil change. So that's number one. And obviously I would use fully synthetic oil. I'm going to use Mobil 1 today. And then the other is, should you swap out your filter housing in the 4Runner? So the 5th gen 4Runner has a plastic oil filter housing. And I actually, for this video, I'm not going to swap it out. I did order a metal filter housing because it's like 40 bucks, OEM Toyota part. Why not swap it out? But the existing plastic oil filter housing is just fine. The issue is that people often see cracking as they get, in the higher mileage range. Once you get 50, 60, 70, 100,000 miles, you might see cracking on that plastic filter. Either way, it's filter housing. Either way, it's super cheap to replace. So if you do end up wanting to replace it, you always can. But I'm just going to swap it when it comes, when I get my metal filter housing. I'm going to swap it out when I do my next oil change. But for today, I'm just going to keep the plastic filter housing because it's a brand new vehicle. It's fine. There's not really any reason for me to swap it out. So that's how I would answer that question. If you want to change it to metal, sure, go ahead. I don't think it makes that big of a difference, or it really is that, big of a concern. So do what you want to do. And then the last is, what type of jacks should you use when you're jacking up your 4Runner? So a lot of folks, if you get a 4Runner for the first time, you might realize, this thing is heavy. It's 6,000 pounds gross vehicle weight. And curb weight is also pretty high on this thing. So if you're jacking it up and you maybe only have 2-ton jack stands in your garage, you might want to upgrade and get some 3-ton jack stands, or maybe even some more heavyweight jack stands. And a lot of folks with the 4Runners use jack stands that have flat surfaces on the top, so you can jack it with your hydraulic jack in the front, where it's at the jack point, which is like right in the center of the skid plate. And then I'll show you that today, even though I'm not going to jack it up today. And then resting it on flat jack stands instead of having to put like a 2x4 on your jack stands, because you want to have the surface flat against the vehicle when you rest the vehicle down in the jack stand. And I would much rather have a flat jack stand on concrete than have like a 2x4 in between a curved jack stand and then the vehicle. It just seems a little bit safer. So to answer your question, I would get some heavyweight, at least 3-ton jack stands for the 4Runner if you're gonna put it up. People do use the Rhino ramps if you have those. I actually have them. I chose not to use them today because I can squeeze under this thing. I'm not that portly, so I can just slide right up under here, and I'm gonna change the oil, but maybe it's gonna suck. We'll see. Let's talk about it as we go. All right, if you wanna see how to change your oil, stick around. Let's do it. I'll give you the quick how-to, and I'll show you real quick what you're gonna need if you're gonna change your oil on your own, which I recommend doing. It's a lot of fun bonding time with your car. All right, so let's check it out and let's see what we have here. Okay, so real quick, here's what you're going to need to actually make this change. You're going to want to have an oil filter pan. You're going to want the Toyota Lexus OEM oil filter. You're going to also want your drain plug washer right here. You're going to want an oil filter wrench. Makes things a little bit easier for you so you don't have to use some kind of other pliers. You're going to want some sort of funnel here, and then you're also going to want an extension as well as 14, 12, 10 millimeter sockets. You're going to want a 3/8 drive ratchet. And if you're anal, you might also want a torque wrench. And then you're going to want your oil. 0W20 is the recommended oil for the 4Runner. And then I also have some gloves just because, you know, why not? And paper towels are always handy. If you haven't changed oil before, it's very easy to make a mess. So I'd recommend checking or grabbing some paper towels before you get started. All right, let's get into it. All right, so first we got to take our skid plate off, and you'll have an air dam up front. You have to pop these 10 millimeters off, and then there is 12 millimeter screws as well that are going into the frame that you got to take off. So first take the air dam off and then remove these. All right, and there's 2 up front, 2 of the air dams. There's also a clip that you're going to want to remove, and then in the rear you have 2 bolts in the rear. There's one right there and one right there. And this is the front skid plate that will ultimately expose the oil filter. And then we'll go back here and we're going to take off these 2 bolts to expose the oil filter pan. All right, let's do it. Oh yeah, it's heavy. Okay, so just to help you poor souls out there, just to help, I would take the air dam off. Take your air dam off first, okay? And then you have these hooks right here that are really the problem. So you're trying to just slide that out of the holes, and that's why it gets a little bit caught. So you have to kind of slide it forward and then tip it up. You want to tilt this up like this to get it out. Okay, so that's helpful. And this is your jack point. We talked about that, but that sits against the frame of the vehicle, the cross member, I think. And that's where you jack under your, if you're ever jacking your vehicle up, that's where you jack underneath your skid plate. All right, let's keep going. All right, so now that we have that out of there, let's move on back to the actual, where the oil drain plug is. You're gonna remove both of these bolts here. They are both going to be 12 millimeter. And there it is, and there's our oil drain plug. Now we're going to pop that off and drain the oil. And before you drain the oil, I like to pop the oil filter cap right here. If you have a 4Runner, it's right there. Dipstick's over there if you're curious about it. I like to pop the oil filter cap. Not the oil filter cap, the oil fill cap. Okay. And I like to put that right there, so I cannot close my hood without putting that filter cap or that oil cap back on. All right, let's do it. All right, so then you want to get your oil filter or your oil pan, oil drain pan right underneath the oil drain plug. Oil drain plug is going to be 14 mil. Okay, it's not very tight. You don't need a lot to crack it loose, so go slow. And once it's loose, then I move to my hands, use fingers here, and you're going to want to start going there, and it's going to start trying to get your drain plug, and then it's going to go. All right, I think the washer's stuck on there, so I'll have to get the washer off, but that's about it. So to get this little washer off right here, the drain plug washer, I had to use a needle nose pliers to get that off, which is pretty wild. So just note that, you know, don't leave that on and don't double washer it. These things stick for some reason. I've never seen that before, but sticking to the oil pan. So needle nose pliers, I'll grab that off. All right, and then once your oil's done draining, you're going to want to replace the drain plug washer. Yeah, you're gonna want to get a new washer, new crush washer there. Got these on Amazon. I'll link them down below. And then replace the drain plug. And you're going to tighten it down to 30 foot-pounds, which is why I said to bring a torque wrench, which we're going to grab now. You can hand tighten it first. Get yourself there. That's it, 30 foot-pounds right there. All right, now we're going to remove our oil filter housing here, and it is going to leak, so just be prepared. Have your paper towels nearby, which, again, I do not. Alrighty, I'm gonna speed this up a tad because I'm just an impatient fella. Alright. Okay, so once you get your oil filter housing out, I'm gonna do a little bit more of a detail here because I don't think anybody covers this on YouTube. So you're gonna take your old drain or your old oil filter here, set that to the side, and remember you have two gaskets here that you're gonna replace. So Your new pack should come with 2 gaskets, and you have your new filter here. Very nice, pretty new filter. And your first gasket is going to be on the outside here. It's very hard to see. It's on the outside of the oil filter, and you're going to make sure it sits in that exact spot that it's currently in. So make sure that when you put the new one in there, it sits right there. And then the other gasket is in here. So I'm going to replace that today. Probably not a huge deal if you leave it, if you're not opening that up. But I'm going to replace that today because why not replace it? All right, so there is your second gasket. Open these up and we will put a little bit of oil on them. Just lube that up like that. Put some oil on your gaskets there. New gasket. Put the new gasket in. Place this. And we'll tighten that once it's on the vehicle. Okay, new filter. And let's get this little gasket off the side here. Now again, this gasket has to sit. Use a little tiny flathead there to get it off. It's got to sit, remember, in that little groove. There's a big, thick groove there. Make sure you sit it in the right groove. Again, a little bit of oil on it is always good. Slide it right on down. You'll have to stretch it a tad and then bring it all the way down to that little channel. Let's take our oil filter, pop it back in. I always start these threads with my hands. You don't want to cross thread your oil filter housing. Kind of think this might be why Toyota uses a plastic one, just to avoid that. All right, hand tighten it. All right, so not super critical, but in case you care, the oil filter housing right here is 18 foot-pounds, and the center oil filter drain is 10 foot-pounds. 18 is very light. All right, now let's drop it down to 10. All right, now super easy. We're gonna snug this back up here. What I like to do is start bolts with my hands, just to make sure when you have metal on metal, you don't cross a thread. All right, so what I like to do before I close up the entire bottom of the vehicle is I'm gonna fill it with oil and check for leaks first, just because I like to, there's not gonna be any leaks, but just like to check, and I would prefer to be able to see. So I'm gonna leave the skid plate off, fill it with oil, start her up, check it, and then I'll put the skid plate back on. All right, so it takes 6.6 quarts, and here's where you get your funnel. Stick it in your where your oil cap goes and fill her up. All right, so I started it up, let it sit for a second. I'm gonna check it anyway, but you should really let it sit for a second, let the oil drain down a little bit. Should be just about touching the top dot on your dipstick. All right, looks good. Well, I'm gonna put the skid plate back on. That's pretty much everything we have for you today. That's how you change your oil on your 5th gen 4Runner. And yeah, if this video was helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. Helps me make more videos like this. I'd love to do more car videos for you all out there. And yeah, don't be intimidated by your oil, by the way. Go out on your own, do it in your garage. It's a lot of fun to do. So you might as well give it a shot. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.